Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. If you weren't with us yesterday, let me tell you what we're doing. We're not doing our usual good, bad, and crazy martinis. Yesterday began our annual 6-part year-end special on the Three Martini Lunch Awards. We hand out awards 3 each day, and it'll run through a week from today, Friday, December 29th. There will be no podcast on Christmas Day or New Year's Day. We will resume our normal good, bad, and crazy martinis on January 2nd. Yesterday, we talked about our individual choices for most overrated, underrated, and honest political figures in 2023. I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, but each year, Jim and I do not compare. We have no idea what choices the other one has made, and that is true today as well. In our categories of a figure we're most sorry to see go, figure who passed away in 2023, also our rising political star, and our political figure fading into oblivion. So, Jim, let's start on the somber side. Certainly some significant passings late in the year, but there's a full year to peruse here. Who topped your list of folks sorry to see go?
Well, Greg, it would probably not surprise you or listeners to know this is my least favorite category. And this year, as I looked back, look, there are a lot of big names, but there were 2 who were in the world of conservative politics and journalism and Republican politics and things like that, who I knew personally, and I counted as friends and went well before their time. The first is Cameron Gray. He was a producer at NRA News for many years. I would go over and do Cam Edwards' show, and hung out with Cameron plenty of times, NRA conventions, just the most jovial, fun, wacky personality you'd ever want to run across. He was a producer for the G. Gordon Liddy show for many years. At his wake, someone brought a giant pile of the Guns and Girls G. Gordon Liddy calendars that they made throughout the early 90s. The kind of crazy end of the conservative spectrum that Cameron was completely at home in. And he died of a heart attack. It was an absolute shock to all of us. And he's going to be missed a lot. And the other one came around the middle of the year, again, well before his time. Nathan Wurtzel worked as a fundraiser for Republican candidates. I believe he ran like direct mail operations and things like that. Hung him out with him once watching a Jet game. Just this, knew everything about New Jersey. And all kinds of bizarre trivia about that and baseball cards and all that stuff. Could be kind of this, wise-ass curmudgeon personality, but like him a lot, and just, again, I think he also passed away from a heart attack very suddenly. And so just, there are times on Twitter or on, gun events or in the news or something like that, and you get used to hearing that voice, and they're not there anymore. So they are very much missed. I will raise the glass. And Cameron Gray, Nathan Wurtzel, I wish you were still with us these days.
I did not know Nathan. I am certainly familiar with him on Twitter, did not interact with him, but certainly aware of him and how well respected he was as a political consultant. I did know Cameron because G. Gordon Liddy eventually migrated over to Radio America for the final 7 years of his career. So I knew him. I actually saw him at G. Gordon Liddy's wake, probably the last time I saw him. And exactly, he was just a free spirit and a great guy, and will be greatly missed. And anytime the passing is very sudden like that, it's especially jarring and shocking. I'm going to mention 3 people here, 2 who I didn't know, but and then one that I did here in Washington. Real quickly, as a Bears fan, the loss of Dick Butkus this year was significant, but it's not a political passing. One who I think needs more attention because he was across the pond is a guy named Nigel Lawson, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer during Margaret Thatcher's administration. First, he was Chancellor of Energy and was big in privatizing the energy industry, British Airways, and a lot of different other areas of the economy there. And then he also led the tax cuts during the Thatcher years as Chancellor of the Exchequer, basically our Secretary of the Treasury. And he turned a deficit into a surplus while doing it. So that's one thing he has on the American tax cutters in the 1980s, is that he actually was able to turn a surplus. In terms of the personal here, and the one I'm actually going to say for 2023 is another guy, longtime journalist in town. He did live a full life. One of the nicest men you'll ever meet, wore a suit everywhere he went. very generous with his time, and just a gentleman in every way, is Don Lambro of the Washington Times. He was a political reporter. He was a columnist, reported on economics a lot of the time. When I was first in Washington, working for Radio America, not the most prominent organization at the time, I certainly had no name in town at the time. Sometimes when it was tough to get people to agree to an interview, he was never like that. He was always eager to tell you what he knew, talk about his reporting, break down a story that was happening in government. He was a brilliant guy. He could sum things up very well. He was a good soundbiter, which I always appreciated. And just, again, a very kind man all the way through. So those who've been in Washington a long time, I'm sure remember that name very, very well. All right, time for our first great sponsor of the day, and that is Provia. Look, are you one of the millions of American men or women of really any age dealing with premature hair thinning and hair loss? Well, don't worry about it, because there's a real solution that delivers on its promise without the harsh side effects, unwanted chemicals, and there's no need for a prescription. It's called Provia. New customers will save more than 50%, plus get free shipping on Provia's introductory package at proviahair.com/martini. Provia uses a safe, natural ingredient called Procapil to effectively target the three main causes of premature hair thinning and loss. The introductory package includes a full 60-day supply of Provia serum for daily use, Provia super concentrate for faster, more noticeable results, and your choice of a free gift. 100% guarantee or your money back. Don't wait. Order now and save an extra 10% off just in time for the holidays at proviahair.com/martini. That's PROVIA hair.com/martini. All right, Jim, let's move on to our happier categories now, particularly this one. I'm not sure the winners in the last category are going to love it so much, but in terms of rising political star, who's at the top of your list in that one?
I'll admit a figure I was not terribly familiar with when the year began, and now he ends the year as one of the most powerful people in Washington. So, Mike Johnson, congratulations. You are not just the next contestant on The Price is Right, you are the next contestant to be Speaker of the House. And as of this recording, which is around mid-December, Mike Johnson has held the House caucus together, involved in some high-stakes negotiations with President Biden and Senate Democrats. But everyone seems reasonably pleased with him so far. He's walking that tightrope. He has a small minority or a small majority. It has not gotten any larger with the departure of George Santos, and Kevin McCarthy will be departing shortly. So he's got a very tough job, but he seems to be handling it pretty well. And who knows, maybe the job of speakership, which seems to be, the task of Sisyphus for a lot of Republican leaders. Maybe Mike Johnson's got the knack for it, got the right balance. We'll see how things go, but he's off to a pretty good start so far.
And he's a guy when, McCarthy was given the boot in that vote on the House floor, he was on nobody's radar screen. Initially, the vote went to, it was a competition between Scalise and Jordan. Scalise won, never got to the floor. Then they tried Jordan, couldn't get over the top. Then Tom Emmer had it for, 15 minutes before he realized he couldn't win. And then all of a sudden, they were unanimous with Mike Johnson.
I believe it was Andy Warhol who said in the future, everyone will be Speaker of the House for 15 minutes.
Exactly. So, yeah, he's a guy I think you and I were aware of existing and who was a fairly solid Republican congressman from Louisiana, but he had not been rumored to be in the hunt for this job. But this is where he finds himself now. The media seems to be very, very intent on finding fault with him in areas related to his faith. But the caucus is remaining loyal to him at this point. I am going to choose a Mike in the House, but a different Mike, another guy that we hadn't seen a lot of or heard a lot of, but seems to be earning respect not only in Republican circles, but across the board. And one of the things Kevin McCarthy did when he was Speaker was creating the Select Committee on China, digging into China's national security ambitions, what they're doing with social media, and just all the different ways, cyber threats that they're worming their way into our government and our society, and just the threat that they pose after so many years of trying to become a bigger superpower than we are. And Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin was named the chairman of this committee at the time. I didn't really know much about him, but they seem to be working really, really well. His Democratic colleague leading the Democratic side of the committee is Krishnamurthy, who is pretty much a bomb thrower on other committees, but they seem to be working really, really well in agreeing how this path of investigating China and disseminating material to the American people about the threat that China poses seems to be methodical, seems to be a lot of cooperation going on there, and they seem to be putting forth a lot of important information to really explain the China threat and perhaps what the U.S. posture ought to be on some of this stuff. So the Republicans wanted him to run for Senate against Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin next year. He has decided not to do that. He wants to keep focusing on this, which may help Tammy Baldwin, which is not great from a conservative perspective. But Mike Gallagher seems to be the right man for the job that he's got right now, and I think we might be seeing bigger stuff from him as well in the year to come. That
is an excellent choice, Greg, and I can give it the highest compliment I can possibly think of. I wish I thought of it.
All right, before we get to the third martini, I need you to listen to me real quickly here. Omaha Steaks. It's almost Christmas time. You know you have people you haven't bought stuff for, and you know at least some of them would love a box of Omaha Steaks. I can guarantee it. If they love steaks, if they love burgers, they love chicken, just quality meats from Omaha Steaks. So let them take the guesswork out of it. And on top of the quality product, go to omahasteaks.com and take advantage of 50% off site-wide. Plus, use the code Martini at checkout and get an additional $30 off your order. Just in the past week, I've had the phenomenal filet mignon. I've had the amazing burgers. I can't recommend Omaha Steaks highly enough, and I know the recipient of your gift will feel the same way. But hurry, the sale ends soon. Visit omahasteaks.com and save big with 50% off site-wide. Plus, use the promo code Martini at checkout to get that extra $30 off your order. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code Martini at checkout. Minimum order may be required. All right, Jim, on to our next and last category for this week and the second edition of our year-end awards, political figure fading into oblivion. This is one where my choices have refused to fade into oblivion at times. I twice nominated Anthony Weiner for this award, and I think Scaramucci at one point, and all of them keep loving the camera too much, although they're both fairly quiet right now. But who's your 2023 choice for this award?
I feel pretty good about this one, but this figure will probably not be a major player on the stage for many more years to come. And I have mixed feelings about it. And the selection is former Vice President Mike Pence. Ran for president this year, never really got much traction. I think most of us, from the very beginning, looked at that and said, well, there are some of us who believe he was always a fairly consistent conservative, did the appropriate duty and called it the right way on January 6th. There was no magic wand way in which he could assure that President Trump could stay in office. Fulfilled his constitutional duties as he should. But that left the Trump world livid with him. And Donald Trump to this day insists that, if Mike had made the right call, they could have stayed in power. But also, people who are critical of Trump see Mike Pence as Trump's right-hand man for most of the 4 years he was in office. And Mike Pence, while running for president, kept referring to the Trump-Pence administration, making sure that he was getting, half the credit for everything that was done then. But also saying that he would come out and say that, Pence would say Trump had brought the party into dangerous populism and all that stuff. And I get that. I don't necessarily disagree with the assessment. I just, Greg, I don't know about you. I just wish between January 20th, 2017 and January 20th, 2021 that Mike Pence had been in some position where he could have influenced the Trump administration's policies in this. If only Mike Pence had been alive then. Yeah, he was vice president. I assume he may have spoken up behind closed doors, but clearly I don't think you can say that Pence had much success at kind of pulling Trump away from his own worst impulses. So he ended up being a man with no faction within the party that was really ready to be fully behind him. And most polls, he didn't really break out beyond single digits. And I don't think there'll be a clamoring for Mike Pence in 2028 or some future cycle. He's getting up there in years. I think it's safe that he can go and enjoy a happy retirement in his golden years with Mrs. Pence. It just, somebody's going to write a biography about Pence and how he was this talk radio host and then kind of a House firebrand. Then he was governor of Indiana, and ironically, it irked a bunch of conservatives out in Indiana. Selected by Trump, was one of the most important people in the Trump presidency, and then ended up being, in the eyes of Trump, this terrible Judas that left him with no particular path back towards the presidency or the Republican nomination. So, Mike Pence, I thank you for your service, but I think it's safe to say that, you'll be riding off into the sunset in the months and years to come.
That's an excellent choice, and he was my first choice as well. I think that's given the very limited duration and impact of his presidential campaign, I think that's exactly right. He always had this impossible needle to thread of Trump supporters who think he's a traitor and people who don't like Trump who aren't going to take him because he was Trump's vice president for 4 years. I don't know what the Venn diagram, as Kamala Harris would say, is on that, but it's not big. The overlap is not big on that. I think along with Trump putting out the Supreme Court nominee list in 2016, I think nominating Pence as vice president was probably one of the top two significant things to convince conservatives that, yeah, I think we can probably do this. In terms of my backup choice, because I always like to have a backup choice in case we agree, I wish it would be George Santos, but it won't be. Unless he's actually behind bars, he's going to be very prominent. We saw it with the cameo that he did trolling Bob Menendez, and so I'm not going to fall for that one again. So, Jim, my official choice as a second backup here is Doug Burgum, a guy who's done apparently a pretty popular job in North Dakota, but nationwide he was not a household name. He ran for president, stirred the pot a little bit by getting himself on stage by giving away $20 gift cards in exchange for a $1 donation. And when you're independently wealthy, you can pull that off. So he got on the stage for a couple of debates, got on there longer than some other folks who had more prominent names coming in, but in the end didn't move the needle much. It just wasn't the year for a guy who needed to introduce himself to the public. It rarely is, as we have explained on a number of occasions. So that means he's going to spend full time on the job in North Dakota. And for the folks who love that, that's fantastic. Nothing against Doug Burgum, but just wasn't his year. And now that he's back focusing on state issues, I doubt he'll be making many national waves again anytime soon.
Yeah, and, who knows? Maybe he'll be Secretary of Energy in some future Republican administration. But, I think that cake needed a little more baking before it was served to the public, so to speak.
So there we go. Congratulations again to our award winners, probably the rising stars more than the folks fading into oblivion. But, Jim, that does it for this week. Again, next week, no podcast on Christmas Day. And then the remaining 4 days of the work week, we'll be handing out our prestigious awards in all sorts of different categories. We'll have, I think on Tuesday, it's Biggest Lie and then Best and Worst Political Theater. We'll also have Best and Worst Ideas, Boldest Tactic. We'll have our fun with the media with overreported and underreported stories. And then on December 29th, it all concludes with our Person of the Year, Turncoat of the Year, and our fearless predictions for 2024, which certainly promises to be an eventful year. So, Jim, Merry Christmas to you and your family, and I'll see you again on Tuesday.
Merry Christmas to all the Corumbuses and to all of our listeners. Hey, we've nearly made it through the year.
And to echo what Jim said, thank you, and Merry Christmas to every listener of the Three Martini Lunch. We couldn't do the podcast without you. Thank you for listening each and every day, and thanks for encouraging your friends to do the same. He's Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corumbus of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast and tell your friends to do the same. Thank you also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play Three Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Once again, a very Merry Christmas, and join us again Tuesday for the next Three Martini Lunch.